My name is Bill Fox. I'm with Oracle Product Management, and we're going to talk a little bit today about EPM Cloud Infrastructure and Security, and maybe have a little bit of fun along the way. So please fill out your presentations, your evaluations on the presentations. I'm supposed to ask everybody to do that. I'm sure you've been asked for that before. And let's start. So the session is Understanding EPM Cloud Infrastructure, What's New? Welcome. Anybody here new to cloud? Anybody here have not yet started in cloud? So this session sort of builds upon a little bit of what I presented last year. I'm thinking next year I'm going to do two sessions, one for an introductory and one for people who have been here before. But we'll cover all the stuff, even if you don't have basic foundation. We're going to start from the basic foundation and work up. If you have any questions along the way, raise your hand. We'll stop. We'll answer questions. We'll entertain that. We'll have discussions. And let's go. If anybody has ever been to an Oracle presentation before, you've seen this. We're required by our legal department to say this, and everybody in this room can has this memorized and can restate that at demand. So we're going to start with where we were last year. Last year when we introduced EPM Cloud Infrastructure and Security at Kscope, we had 5 services that were out here. Here they are. This year, we've been a little bit busy. We got a few more. We have profitability and cost management. We have tax reporting cloud service. We also have a bunch of new options. For EPRCS, we have disclosure management, which came out officially, well, it was distributed last month, but it is officially available and purchasable as about a week ago. And we have, for account reconciliation from last year, transaction management. All of that is new. We've added 4 modules for PBCS, the workforce planning, CapEx, financial statement, and the project financial planning options. All of these are new since last year. So that sort of sets the stage on where we are, where we've been, how we got here. I want to stop and pause. We're going to go back to the very, very beginnings and build on that so that everybody's on the same page, using the same language, because in all the emails that come out, there's a whole bunch of different words that people use to try and describe the same thing. So before I go down off the path and get everybody confused, let's set the language and what we all mean by all of this stuff. It's a little pun, a few words on semantics. I thought it was funny. Okay, what is an account? At the very bottom of everything, every organization that has a cloud subscription has an account. Think of it as your cable TV account. It's the same thing here. Within that account, you start to build on your services. The next layer in that stack is your identity domain. The identity domain is where you manage your users, how they log on, what their passwords are, how do you reset them. It includes things like single sign-on. It is just the entire user management layer of your stack. On top of your identity domains, you have a subscription. This is where the language starts to get kind of unique. These are licensing term languages. When everybody places an order for a cloud service, your ordering documents will use these words. Subscription. Planning and budgeting cloud service is a subscription. Enterprise performance reporting cloud service is a subscription. You will purchase a subscription. Every subscription will have a subscription ID that uniquely identifies that purchase. And then lastly, within that subscription, you will be provisioned with, by default, 2 environments. People call them pods, people call them instances. These are officially called environments. So throughout the session, when I use the words account, identity, domain, subscription, and environments, everybody is with me. By default, production and test. No questions? Everybody can recite what an identity domain is? We're good to go. Okay, so what that looks like now, structured and all laid out, for anybody that's purchasing multiple services from their single account, multiple subscriptions, is within that account, they can have 1 or more identity domains. Identity domains cannot change logical data centers. So I have an identity domain here in Ashburn, Virginia, it was Sydney, Australia, and Amsterdam. The identity domain names are now automatically selected for you. They typically are things like A and then 5 or 6 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They all look the same. Those are your identity domains. Within those identity domains, your subscriptions are provisioned. In this case, we've got an example of PBCS, EPRCS, and tax reporting cloud service. On the left-hand side are my production environments. Well, let's just say my primary environments, my production and my test, my primary environments. In the center, you'll see these things called standby, which kind of hints a little bit about disaster recovery, which there's a lot of confusion about. We have a couple of slides we're going to get to disaster recovery. So I've got my primary subscription in Ashburn. I've got some standby subscriptions in Sydney and some other standbys in Amsterdam. In there, I have production and test, production and test, production and test, production and test. This is a typical layout. So understanding the infrastructure starts at this. What happens in your environments when you buy these things, that's how they lay out. Everybody good? No questions? Question, Mike.
And I guess the way the next is, it stands to follow that an identity domain can't cross geographic location. Then a subscription is isolated by identity domain, so you couldn't split a pod in one geographic location.
So that is a leading question, which I don't have a slide here for, but I can answer it. So Mike is asking, the way it's structured, I've got my primary development test subscription and my production subscriptions in the same identity domain, in the same data center, geographic data center. And the answer right now, today, is that is true. So now we go back to that slide from the legal people over there. Coming soon, if you have multiple identity domains, if you've subscribed across multiple identity domains, and there are lots of ways you can get there, you'll be able to move by yourself, self-service, an individual environment from one identity domain to another identity domain. And it doesn't matter if it's the same type of subscription, FCCS to FCCS. It doesn't matter if the names of the subscriptions are the same, because if you move them and they're the same, you'll be asked to rename it, and you'll be able to then have one environment in one identity domain and another environment in another identity domain. Good answer? Good. Other questions? We're moving on. Okay. A little bit about the rest of the presentation in here. The architecture for all of EPM Cloud is shared. We're all built on the same basic architecture. So unless I otherwise specify, and you'll see it in the presentation, unless I otherwise specify an exception, everything I say here applies to all EPM Cloud services. Let's talk a little bit about the options. And options here include things like memory, space used rather, all the different purchasable options or the subscriptions that I talked about before, the for planning and budgeting cloud service options, disclosure management for EPRCS, transaction for account rec. And then new as of last week is additional storage. All these things, all these options that you purchase are baked right into the service. So if you purchase them and you want to then enact them, there is nothing you have to do. None of these things are programmatically enforced. So if you wanted to vary from your license agreement, there's nothing stopping you from doing that from the service. You're prohibited from doing that from your license agreement, but it's all there. So you add an option to your service and everything goes through the process, and then you can use it with licensing. It's all baked in, very easy. You don't have to do anything on that. Yes?
Some of the features you add, like I guess you don't need to subscribe and pay extra for it, like planning and budgeting, there will be new strategic planning, which is free.
Yes and no. So certain features are free. Strategic planning is part of financial statement module. So if you get financial statement module, then you get the strategic planning feature. And if you get enterprise performance planning and budgeting cloud service, which includes financial statement planning, you get that feature for free. Otherwise, it's not licensed. And that's in the service descriptions. Everybody knows what the service descriptions are? I'm sure none of you do. But it's an important document. I'll come back to that in a second when I get some more questions. No, Essbase on the cloud is not part of EPM. EPM includes Essbase as part of its engines that drive all the consolidations and stuff. But Essbase as a service is part of BI. BI Cloud Service is where all that stuff goes into. It's separate, and you got to talk to the BI folks about it. But it is included here. Question? So let me sort of restate that question more accurately. So what you would do is expand your order for your subscription, right? We're going back to all that language. You're going to expand, you're going to submit an expansion order for the subscription, PBCS, and you're going to add the option for additional storage. And what that's going to now do is license you to use more than the standard 150 gigabyte limit that is otherwise licensed. There's nothing programmatic to stop you from going from 149 gigabytes to 152 gigabytes. If you do that, your service is going to continue pumping along just fine, but you're now in license violation. That metric, by the way, is hosted for your account administrators and your service administrators, so that when they poke in on the portal, they'll see that they're utilizing 152 gigabytes of storage, and then you know that you're out of compliance. But you add the additional option, nothing changes except your licensing, and now you're in compliance. Hey, Mike. There is no active alerting, but the dashboard shows that. But there's no active alert. So there's no active alert to the administrator. There is an active alert to Oracle. So it'll be monitored, and there'll be an alert, and an email will be sent to the account rep, and the account rep will be knocking on the door saying, by the way, you should probably purchase additional storage so that you remain in license compliance. And you would gladly say, of course we're going to do that, and everybody is happy.
So somehow they will eventually find out that
They will find out one way or the other. Yes. There's a question over here. Yes, Mauro. Disk storage, not memory, but disk storage. Those are optional. So, okay, so I think what you're asking is, what happens if you need more CPU processing power? Is there an option for me to purchase additional processing power? So, in the background, throughout the entire servicing of the service, we're monitoring resource utilization, and we're generating reports to our own internal cloud operations. And then every night, we're also running health checks. So we know what your resource utilization is, and we can trend it. And if we notice that there's something happening, we can adjust the resources. So you wouldn't even necessarily know about it. If you need more CPU power, we're in the back and we're noticing, and we see the trend, and we watch the monitoring, and we see what's happening. We don't know all the details. We have no idea what your data is, but we know what your resource utilization is, and we can adjust that. And there's nothing. Nothing. There is an additional cost if you need more storage. There's no additional cost if you need more processing. Yes, I can't read your name, I'm sorry. You do that manually. There's also something that's new-ish, which I'm going to get to later, called activity reports that provide that. And it gives you a snapshot overview of everything that's going on inside your service. Right now, we do not send out alerts that says you're trending badly, but you should be monitoring that. Is there a future for that to happen? I don't know the answer to that. That's happening out at the cloud operations level, and I'm on the EPM level, and I hate to say, you know, this team, that team, and all of that, but I don't have an answer for that right now. I've not heard that that's happening, though, at the moment. Red shirt question, and then we'll do gray shirt question. So the question restated is, what if I have a requirement for more than a test and a production environment. If I also want to have a stage environment or a dev environment, what do I do there? And there are two answers. There is back to our safe harbor statement, there is a new product SKU that is in the works now to provision an additional subscription that'll give you 2 environments for non-production use. It's not available for purchase now, but you'll be able to do that. And the reason for that is to now enable people to have an additional stage, dev environment, or to create a disaster recovery standby site, which I sort of hinted at earlier, and we're going to come back to that. So you can't purchase that yet. But in the meantime, if you have a requirement for an additional stage environment, bring that requirement to your account rep, because we can help you with that. Right now, you don't have that environment. There are ways that we can structure this, and that will come back to me again, and I'll provide non-standard licensing language to get another subscription, and we'll manage all of this stuff through the account rep. So can you purchase it explicitly? Not yet. You will be able to purchase it. Are you stuck? Absolutely not. Go to the account rep. We'll get you squared away. It'll be the same sort of costing. It'll be the exact same way with the workaround from licensing to get you where you need to get to. There was a gray shirt question. We do, actually. So the question is, on these health checks, are they available to customers, service, or account administrators to actually see what's going on? The answer is yes, but it's not the same sort of stuff that we're looking at in the back, because the stuff that gets looked at in the back is not particularly meaningful for customers. But we do monitor transaction time. If I'm running a transaction, what is the average length of these transactions? And I've got some slides later on that talk about activity reports that I could actually specify which of these transactions are my worst performing transactions, so we can investigate into that. All of that is accessible, it's available, you can pull them down every night, you can analyze them when you need to analyze them. A lot of it shows up in your dashboard so you can see what's going on in there. So the answer is yes, but it's not the same stuff that is being exposed in the health checks. Mike? No.
Transaction being the same over time is interesting, and I can see why I have that. So what I'm buying from you is a guarantee that putting my stuff there, and in general, the transaction time will remain the same over the years. And the compute is your buy.
We'll do that. Right now there. Right. So there are, as part of all of that, extending all of that question out, what does Oracle provide in terms of its service management? And all of that's detailed in the ordering documents in very broad legal language. It's all available in our cloud licensing page, which if you haven't taken a look at, you really should. That's where the service descriptions are. The service descriptions define in detail what these services include. And it includes all the stuff about what Oracle provides and what it doesn't provide. It includes language on disaster recovery. All these mysterious things are all there. You just have to know where to look for them. So if anybody needs them, send me an email, billfox@oracle.com. One more question, then I'm going to move on because we'll never make it out of here. In EPM Cloud, certain products have sandbox options. PPCS has a sandbox options. That is a functional offering as part of an individual subscription, but not all the subscriptions have that functional offering. EPRCS does not have a sandbox at the moment, but you could build your own sort of sandboxing kind of thing. Just create separate EPRCS report stuff and treat them as sandbox and put them in a sandboxing folder. But it's sort of different than like a PPCS thing. Oh, okay. So I'm not actually I'm going to defer that question to the PPCS functional PMs as opposed to the infrastructural PMs. I'll be able to give you a better answer. I mean, I can make up an answer for you, but that's probably not a good idea. All right, I'm going to move on. So to Mike's question before, what do we have to worry about in terms of resources? Really not very much, right? Everything is in the Oracle EPM Cloud, and we're going to tell you what you can expect in terms of performance and availability and disaster recovery and all this other stuff. So the things that you used to have to worry about, how many CPUs, how much memory, how much disk, all of that other, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore. You can monitor what your processes are taking, and that's good, and we can optimize those processes. You don't have to worry about the rest of it. It's very, very simple. It is not unlimited, but so the way that these things get provisioned, CPUs, memory, disk, all of this stuff is at the initial provisioning, they are fully provisioned with what we expect to be whatever you are going to need over the life of your subscription. But if it turns out that that's not right and you need more CPU, we can adjust. And that's not to say that you would have unlimited, because at some point something's wrong. You shouldn't require unlimited CPU, but you should have adequate CPU to do the performance that you need, and we'll provide that CPU for you. That's not an unlimited thing. Something's going to trigger. You're going to have a health check trigger that's saying you're requiring 467% greater CPU than everybody else. So what's going on your subscription? And we'll knock on your door and say, let's check it out. I'm fully aware of Exalytics. Would you get Exalytics? So I'm going to go back to Mike's question. The number of CPUs that you get is immaterial. It doesn't matter if it's one big whomping CPU or 500 CPUs. What's material and germane to this discussion is your performance. So, well, I don't want to say that you're going to get the same performance because I don't know what your application looks like, and I don't know how things are, there's a whole bunch of things going on there. But you will move from PBCS to planning Exalytics to PBCS. We will help you with your consulting to make sure that your performance is good in PBCS. So you don't have to worry about that stuff. The number of CPUs behind the scenes, immaterial. I could tell you we have 17 CPUs and they're badly designed, and it's not going to help you. In fact, that's what this slide is trying to convey. Doesn't matter. Okay, let's move on to the next stuff. User management. It's a perennial favorite. Everybody wants to know about user management and security. This is just a very simple slide as to how all this stuff works. We talked about the identity domain. We talked about the service itself. Here you've got the service off in the cloud. You've got the identity domain. We call it shared identity domain. You've got the end user. Did that actually work? Yeah, something slipped up over here. So what's supposed to happen is the request is going to go in to the cloud service. Actually, there it is. It gets distributed, redirected up to SIM, comes back down. Your identity is authenticated. Your user is asserted. You're into the cloud service. It's just a very simple form-based authentication. Very simple. Nothing sexy about that at all. What it provides is the form-based user and password authentication. It provides single sign-on with other EPM Cloud services that are in that same identity domain, because once your user has been asserted, you're good to go. Be careful there if you're putting EPM and Fusion Cloud in the same identity domain, because that SSO, while you would think would sort of work, it doesn't necessarily work. And we have solutions for that, but not by default like this. These are all the policies about shared identity management. Your passwords are going to expire every 100 days. You will be locked out after an X number of undocumented, unsuccessful attempts. I'm always asked this question: how many attempts before I get locked out? And my answer is, we can't tell you, because if we tell you, it's sort of like a security thing, and you don't really need to know. You need to know you're going to get locked out, and then what happens when you get locked out, and all of that happens. But we're not going to tell you, so don't ask. All the rest of it is there. 8 characters long, a lowercase, a numeric, and an uppercase. That's all there is to know about it. It's simple. Red shirt, question. So the question is, if I go beyond that X number of undocumented, unsuccessful attempts to authenticate, and I am locked out, how do I get locked in again? You got to call your identity domain administrator. We didn't talk about identity domain administrators, but remember that identity domain layer? There is a unique role that gets provisioned to your users to manage the identity domain, including setting up all the users and stuff. So if you get locked out because you went beyond the X number of undocumented, unsuccessful attempts, call up your identity domain administrator and he or she will lock you back in. There was another question after. You're a good straight man. We'll get you in the next slide. Good, good. We're all on the same page, Mike. What are you trying to configure? Like users and authorizations? Okay, so Mike is talking about how do I manage the users across the identity domains and do it really easily. And I don't have it on this slide. I did it last year, which is why I want to split this. I'll redo it again next year. So the answer to that question is yes, but you want to do it in a very special way, which is the way that I would recommend doing it anyway. Don't sit there and key in all of your users because you're going to make errors and you're going to spend a lot of useless time. Get them into a CSV, import the CSV, then take the same CSV, import it into your other identity domain. Your users are now all set up. Roles go the same way. There's like 3 roles for every cloud service. So, well, for each of the functionals, and you have identity domain and account administrator. So it's like 5 roles. Do the same thing. Create the CSVs for the roles, import them into your first identity domain, import them into the second identity domain. You got the same people provisioned. You're good to go. No, you got 2 separate identity domains. Remember how you're managing these 2 things separately. They don't know of each other. They won't assert across because you're in 2 entities managing the authorization. Well, the authorization part, but here we're talking about authentication. No, so the user, once they get created, is going to receive an email that says, welcome, you've been provisioned to this service, and here's your user ID and your temporary password. And as soon as the second one happens, they'll get the second password. They will not have to set it. They will be told what their second temporary password is. And then when they log on the first time, they'll be required to change it and provide security response questions. They might have the same password if you're really smart, but you're all asking the same question, which is on my next slide. 13 applications. So does that mean you have 13 subscriptions? Let's use subscriptions. Yes. Yes. So, okay, so we have now, this is the classic, right? Authorization versus authentication. You're going to authenticate across the identity domain. Doesn't matter what your subscriptions are in that identity domain. The subscriptions are lower. But you're authenticated across everything, notwithstanding the little fusion thing I talked about before. You're authenticated, you're good to go there. So now the question is, now that I'm authenticated, what am I authorized for? I have 13 subscriptions, which gives me 26 environments. Am I good to go across all of those environments? And the answer is no, because each of those environments are separately provisioned, which grants you authorizations within each of those environments. So I can have 3 production environments over here, and 7 test environments over here, and 5 I have both production and test, or however you want to do that. And I would manage all of that through the CSV files and keep them exactly the same. Okay, I'm going to move on, because we're definitely going to run out of time over here. I'm on slide 22 of 63, and I got lots more ground to cover. Okay, but what if you want more? Which has been the question that's sort of been coming. What if I want to do multi-factor? What if I want to do SSO? What if I want to manage my own custom password policies? I want to do a VPN. All these other things. What if I want to do stuff that's not provided by shared identity management? Yes, you can. You can do that through federated identity management with any SAML 2.0 identity provider. Now, there's some differences here between EPM Cloud and Fusion Cloud. For Fusion Cloud, you have to call support, and there may be a separate charge for that. So there's some variations. On EPM Cloud, it's very simple. It's self-serve. You got a UI, you take the metadata from your identity provider, there's a button on the identity provider, you push it, it spits out its metadata, you import that onto your identity domain. There's a whole process here. You push the button, it says, here's my metadata from my identity provider. Once that's done, you push the button on EPM Cloud Identity Management. It puts out its metadata, which you then feed back to your identity provider. So now they each know each other, and then you push the test button. It is that simple. And the authentication part is now transferred. So what does that look like? It looks pretty much like the same thing, except when the request comes in to SIM, SIM knows it's been configured and for SSO with an on-premise identity provider. It sends the request out to your on-premise identity provider, which then authenticates and asserts the user's identity back to SIM, back to the browser, and then you grant it access in. So with that, I can do whatever the identity provider can do in terms of policy, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of all this kind of stuff. And so the answer is yes. If you don't like what's going on in SIM, good. Do whatever you want to do with your identity provider. Does that answer everybody's questions about what happens next? Okay. What's next? Oh, what else is next? So what happens if I want to restrict access? I want to make sure everybody's coming across the cloud from their workstations, wherever they may be. I want to know what's going on. I want to protect it. I want to make sure it's coming in from a cleared source over my VPN. I can set up a whitelist, which identifies the IP addresses of accessible requests. So if I have a request coming outside of that, like from the user workstation from home onto their, whatever their internet provider is, into the Oracle data center, it gets rejected. I'm making sure that the user is coming in over VPN through the customer, into the customer cloud center, and then out, right? Because I've rejected the request from the IP address of whatever's servicing that user workstation at their home or their beachfront condo because they're on vacation. So all that makes sense. Everybody gets what's going on there. It is not difficult to do, but it is something that you're going to probably need to get your network administrator to do, because you're not going to know all the ranges of the IP addresses of their data center, nor should you necessarily know. But your network administrator will know that, and they'll set up whitelisting. And now the only way into Oracle Cloud is from the IP addresses that the network administrator sets up that are cleared IP addresses. And now you're good to go. Yes? You can put ranges in, you can put multiple ranges in, you can put allowable whitelisted IP addresses, you can do the reverse, you can do blacklists. I want nothing except these IP addresses. So you can control all of that stuff. You can do them by range, by CIDR, by subnet mask, by address, however you want to do them. Have fun, knock yourself out. Connect to your network from the identity domain. So I'm not sure I understand the question. Let's talk after the presentation. Data protection and encryption. What time are we over? Over in 10 minutes. I'm going to go really quick. Okay. All the data in EPM Cloud is encrypted in transit. TLS 1.2. Everything. You can't get in because you don't have any open, non-encrypted ports. So the only way you're getting in is through encryption. All the relational data that's stored in all the EPM Cloud services are all encrypted using TEE, transparent data encryption. They each have their own key. The key is stored in the wallet. The wallet is additionally password protected. All of that is encrypted. There ain't nothing that's in here that anybody can take a look at. There's an exception. sort of. S-based data is machine coded. It's coded in a machine readable format. It's not a human readable format. It's machine coded. It is not encrypted, however. The metadata, which describes all of this, is stored in the relational database, so it is encrypted using the same TDE. So what you get is, okay, let's say the worst thing happens and somebody can break through and they can decipher the machine readable code. You're going to get a grid that looks like that grid I put up there. There's no headers, there's no information, there is nothing on there that describes what that is, so it's not particularly meaningful. So S-based encryption is coming, by the way, later. Safe Harbor replies. You're really in good shape over here. Daily maintenance. Anybody know about daily maintenance? Everybody running daily maintenance? Happens every day. Happens at a time that you specify. Most cloud services use the one that is on the right. EPRCS does it a little bit differently. It uses the one on the left. It gives you some additional capabilities for doing things like a restore. But really, all you're doing is saying at whatever time you specify, the system's going to go down, maintenance is going to be run, we're going to be applying the patches, we're going to be doing any updates, we're going to be running the health checks, and then we're going to come back and you're back up and in business. You specify when that all happens. I said all this stuff. Disaster recovery. We sort of mentioned this before. Okay. Has anybody heard that disaster recovery is not provided for EPM Cloud? Anybody heard that? That is absolutely not true. I'm not sure how that happened or where that happened, but it is absolutely not true. So I wanted to dispel that myth now and put it to bed. Disaster recovery option is not purchasable for EPM Cloud. That doesn't mean Oracle doesn't provide disaster recovery. It does, and this is included and identified on that same page I talked about with all the contract stuff in what's called a pillar document. So if the service becomes unusable, Oracle will provide a disaster recovery standby site and say you're back up and running and here's what it's going to be. What is not included in there is an RTO, RPO, recovery time objective, recovery point objective. So, okay, what if I need to have a recovery, what if I have specific RTO, RPO objectives? I need to do this because this is mission critical and I want to do it. So you don't have a SKU to purchase disaster recovery by a separate environment, which we talked about. We'll have a SKU shortly about a separate disaster recovery or non-production environment. You'll be able to buy that and configure it to use in a disaster recovery environment. Let's kind of get into the details on that. So what it's going to look like. Your regular subscription is running up on the top, and you've got EPM Cloud, whatever the service is, doing its thing. You're going to take a backup snapshot. The backup snapshot we just talked about happens at daily maintenance. You're going to pull it down out of the cloud and store it off onto your local file system. And then once you've done that, you're going to push it up into your second subscription that you've purchased, the standby subscription. This can be scripted. You can use EPM Automate for most cloud services. EPRCS uses EPRCS CTL, EPRCS control. You're pulling it down in a scripted, scheduled, daily basis, pull down the backup, store it on your file system, push it back up onto your standby site. Everybody get that? It's very simple. The entire image comes down from the service, and you're pushing it from one to the other. Mike?
To your point, what that's really giving you is control over your RTO.
Correct.
Because Oracle is contractually and basically business-wise driven to recover. The reason for that is that, right? If I'm having DR, everybody else needs to probably also have it.
Most likely, but not necessarily, but yes.
An entire side of it.
Something fell off the rails.
So there's one of the issues. Oracle's going to be scrambling to get that fixed. This allows me to control an RTO by pushing it on my own to another site and Oracle to another site.
Correct. And we're going to get back to all the details on all of that stuff. Question? Well, then there's licensing language, which you should probably read about that. It pretty much says that you're responsible to do that. And then in the documentation, there's very strong language that says, Oracle urges you to do this every day because you don't want to be in a situation. You can call support, and support will help you recover all of that stuff, but they might charge you for that. It's what the licensing says. And you don't want to deal with support. If you can do it better yourself, do it yourself, because they don't have to wait. You don't have to register an SR and wait for it to get it. All of that stuff. Don't do it. Just do it. Script it once and go. So, okay, that's what's happening over there. I got 10 minutes and a lot of ground to cover. You do not want your standby site to be in the same data center as your primary site, right? Because if something really big happens in Chicago, you don't want your standby site to be in the same Chicago place. Put it in a different data center. Right now, EPM Cloud goes to US, which is, well, mostly we're going to Ashburn, but there's some old stuff on Austin and some medium old stuff in Chicago, Amsterdam, Sydney. Next, I was going to say month, but I don't want to say month. I'll say next quarter. It's going to Canada too, Toronto. So there'll be a new data center there. These things change all the time, constantly changing. And even as we speak, things go back and forth. It used to be all Ashburn. Now we're going back into Chicago a little bit. These are your options. When you make the order, if you're looking for an order specifically for disaster recovery, usually those orders come to me. I'll help structure those, and I'll give specific instructions to make sure the order gets provisioned into a non-same data center so that you're good to go. Good? Make sense? Yes. Question? Virginia. Anybody from Virginia? No. Well, so let me rephrase that. That's not really artful. We originally started provisioning in Austin, and then as that filled up, things moved into being provisioned in Chicago, and then as that filled up, it moved into Ashburn. So now we got all three of these kind of going, and as space moves. So you need to talk to me after this session, because I can't answer that right now with everybody, and I'm going to run out of time, but we can fix that. Okay. I'm going to just gloss over this because this is details. These are the commands you're going to want to do. This is how you do your backup. Export snapshot and download file from most cloud services. On EPRCS control, you want to do download DB snapshot and upload DB snapshot. It's as simple as that. Put them into a scripting file, use Windows Scheduler. It'll run every day. You never have to worry about it, and it'll be done. So then, if you have a problem at the first one, because I've been doing this thing every day, now I can switch gears instantly. And my RTO, my recovery time objective, is virtually 0. Everybody, don't use this URL, use this URL. My recovery point objective, however, is at the maximum 24 hours, because every day on a 24-hour basis, I'm creating a new snapshot, I'm pushing it up. So it depends when the failure happens. It's possible that my RPO is like a minute. It's also possible that it's like 11 hours and 59 minutes. The reality is it's going to be somewhere distributed in the middle, and it'll probably be some even distribution of 12 hours plus or minus. So that's pretty good. At worst, I've got a day of lost. That's my worst case scenario. Otherwise, it's like a half a day or a quarter or something. Yes? Talk to me after the session. Sort of. I mean, so let me go back. Let me not answer it like that vaguely. Every time you run daily maintenance, a backup is set. So let's say you've done this huge data load and you've got a brand new set and you're in the middle of the day, but you want to restore, you want to get a capture of that snapshot. Just move your backup daily maintenance to the next top of the hour, and it'll push out a new backup and then pull it down again. And then you can reset it back to your normal time. So it's sort of like faking out how you can sort of do all that. I didn't hear that, Mike. Only by doing that. By resetting, because snapshots only happen at daily maintenance. No, you can download it anytime, but they only get created at maintenance. So you got to change your maintenance. Okay. Service updates happen at daily maintenance. They happen on the test environment the first Friday, mostly, of every month, and on the production environments on the third Friday of every month. You don't have to do anything about it. We give all the service administrators at least a week's notice that they're coming in, and then there is a what's new document that if you haven't read, you should be reading. It's on cloud.oracle.com/readiness, and then look for EPM. And they're all up there. Every what's new document since the dawn of time is up there, mostly. So you can see what we're pushing forward in with the next coming release, and you can kind of get a heads up and get yourself geared for it. You do not need to test it. If you want to test it, we encourage you to test it. Lots of people are out there testing them. They are incremental updates. A lot of times they're infrastructural. We also introduce new features and functionality in there, but you always have a heads up. If there's something with a major impact, like you're going to need a new version of SmartView, or there's, for the moment, we still have FR Studio client installs, we give you advance notice of more than that. We'll give you at least a month, but it's more like 3 months that we give you advance notice. And FR Studio, things that will be deprecated, we give you lots and lots and lots of time. Months, 6 months, a year, something like that. There was a question in the back somewhere. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question. An example of an update would be, for example, EPRCS disclosure management. Can you exempt yourself? No, and in fact, it's on the, let me not say no. For the most part, no. But you don't want to go off the main branch, because if you go off the main branch, you're sort of missing out on updates and improvements and all the rest of it. You have to keep your service maintained. That's in the contracts. There's really no way around it. If there is a rare, valid case where it's not feasible to accept the update, escalate it, because we can disable that. But I have to tell you, it is an exceptionally rare case. We have thousands of EPM Cloud customers, and there's probably a half a dozen that have taken that path. It's not something you want to do, and best to avoid it. We can do it if you really, really, really have to do it. We're going to push back hard because you don't want to be there and we don't want you to be there. But if there's a real reason, we'll get you there. Yes? It's the same 1 hour, 1 hour max. So whenever we do daily maintenance, we say it's an hour. And there have been some times where it's kind of run over. We have to fix that. We fix that. But all the stuff happens in that same cycle, 1 hour. So you don't even, life just keeps going on. That's why you go to the cloud. Yeah, there's other stuff. EPM Automate is a client download. EPRCS Control is a client download. They're not installs for the utilities. FR Studio is an install. SmartView install's got two components. The add-in is not an install. The SmartView itself is an install. We try and do all of these updates in the add-on, so it's not. But we'll give you advance notice, and we'll tell you every month if you got to do something. We'll let you know. And if it's a client install, we'll give you a long time. That's Al Orsianti. He's PM for all things, including SmartView. Question? So for that question specifically with Close, I'm going to have to direct you to Rich Wilkie, who's the PM for Close. Okay. I'm going to go really quickly because I'm running over. But we do all of this stuff everything you can do in EPM Automate, you can also do with the REST API, so you can programmatically control all of that stuff. I got one more section I really want to talk about. Yes, don't take what's posted right now, because I've updated these things as early as like 9:30 this morning. But this is the final, this is what's going to get posted. There's a couple of things I wanted to talk about. I talked briefly about activity reports. These are the reports that give you insight into what's happening in your cloud service. A question was asked, do I get to see what's happening in terms of health checks? This will give you all the stuff about what's happening in the reports. Between the activity reports and the user access reports, you've got insight into what's happening. There's lots of important things. One of the most helpful things in here is it'll give you which portions of your applications are taking the longest time to execute. So if you're having performance, this will tell you exactly where to look to see where you can improve performance and fine-tune. I'm going to blast through all this stuff. Access logs, who's accessed my system. This is just how to get to the access logs, where in the applications they are. System audit. This is for EPRCS because it doesn't have what I just talked about. But system audit does the same thing functionally. If you go into system audit, create system audit, it'll tell you everything that's happened in the system. It'll give you the user ID and the IP address from which it happened and the specific functional thing that that individual did. So if you want to pull all that stuff down, you've got it all. It's the functional equivalent of the access reports from the rest of EPM Cloud. Okay, this is my last topic, and that'll set you free. Replay command. This applies to everything but EPRCS. The question comes up, how can I do system performance testing? And the answer is you're not allowed to, because it's in the license contract that says, I promise I will never do screen scraping and do performance load testing and all the rest of it. But we do provide this replay command, which enables you to actually do performance testing in a perfectly valid and legitimate way. Basically what you do is you identify what the top likely processing parts are. What do I have to do that's going to take a lot of computations, and that'll potentially be a bottleneck for me. Submitting forecasts or processes involved with ad hoc, static reports, all these big things that just chug away. Identify them. Then run those activities. Run them through SmartView and keep Fiddler Trace on. You have to get Fiddler Trace, because Fiddler Trace is going to track all of those HTTP requests, and we're going to be able to capture them in a file. And then what you do is, with all of those scenarios, you'll create a CSV file. All this is in the presentation. We're going to go forward with it for time. Create the CSV file, put in a user ID that is allowed to execute that command, that's got all the full authorizations in there, their user ID, their password, and the Fiddler HAR file. That's the trace file that you just created by doing it in SmartView. Line them all up in the CSV file, submit them through EPM Automate with the replay command, and it'll execute all of that stuff in parallel. And then at the end of all that stuff, you get to go back to your activity report and see what happened. And you can monitor all that, and you can monitor it from the metrics on your dashboard. So if you are inclined to do activity performance testing, do it here. And if you're having performance, do it here. Find out what it is, go do it, and then take a look at the activity reports. It'll tell you the areas that are having the toughest time with performance. Question? That's exactly it. Now, the activity report's going to tell you that anyway. The activity report's going to tell you these are your 6 worst performing forms. So you'll know pretty much what they are. Do them under test. Put a bunch of people in there, do them under test. It'll tell you how long it's going to run. Do it on your test environment. I mean, you could do it on your production environment, but we recommend you do it on your test environment. It'll give you all the details you need to do. That's like really good for being able to troubleshoot and identify where you want to fine tune. Question? Current level of which files? Lock files. I don't know the answer to that question. See me after the session, which we're almost done with. Oh, this is what your CSV looks like, which I already described anyway. The user ID, the password, the script file, and that's it. It's the replay command how you use it. It's very simple. EPM automate replay with the CSV, how long you run it for, and if you wanted to produce a trace, it's an option. And then the activity report, and we're done. Questions? Absolutely. If you want to do that, you can see how one update affected the next. So the question was, can I use replay to test regression from one to the next? And the answer is yes, of course. And you don't have to do anything else because you've got the HAR files and you've got the CSV files. So when the new test environment comes in on the first Friday of the month, run the replay command and you'll be able to compare it to your last month. No, it's only performance. This is performance. It's not functional. Question? No, you would not want access to that. The reason you would not want access to that is because if you have access to that, then that person has access to that, and that person could figure out potentially a way to get into what you may not want them to be getting into. None of the infrastructural details are distributed to end users for cloud customer protection. It's a security thing. So, no. So you can look at the audit log, you can look at all the performance stuff, you can look at who's accessed what, you can look at all of the metrics, you cannot look at what's happening inside, behind in the infrastructure. And if you have a problem, there's something I didn't talk about here, I talked about it last year, I didn't want to do it again and replicate what I did. There is a function called provide feedback. If you need to get access to the logs because something weird is happening, through the UI, provide feedback. It enables you to create screenshots and descriptions, and the next screenshot and a description, and you click send. And that goes off through HTTPS into a support FTPS server, and it's got all the logs and all the screens that you've created and all the descriptions, and from there they can help you go through it. But the schema and the rest of it is not going to be helpful for you. You don't need to know it, you don't want to look there, you don't want anybody else to know what your schema is. So we could help you, but that's how you do it. Yes, back when, we'll get to you next.
Regarding this additional information, like so if you don't have access to this kind of information in the cloud, how we can get, for example, a report regarding
So that's what I was just talking about, right? Shankar would be the one to talk about when that gets provided, but in the short term, go through the provide feedback UI because all of that information will then get captured and pushed down to support to assist. Question? Sorry. I got the same response for you, but yes, I understand. Your question? Well, mostly. We don't even have upgrades anymore. We don't do upgrades. We do monthly updates. R11 to R12 is a fusion thing. We don't have that in EPM. So Fusion, you can do that, and Fusion has that R12, R11, but they're changing. They're moving more towards the EPM model. It's better for you. It really is. So we have all of the LCM stuff in place where you can do individual artifacts. But if you're looking to migrate the entire state of the system, which maybe that's what you're trying to do, just pull down the entire image, the DB snapshot, and push it from one environment to the other. It just cloned the whole thing.
So I strictly want to migrate my dimensional security early to that through log files, right? So we parse the log files, we have a process we develop. So occasionally, once every couple of years, totally reorganize one of the data. They need to redo their entire dimensional security with one of the net. What's the process?
Yeah, I would have to refer you back to the PBCS PMs on all of that, because that would happen through the functional part as opposed to the infrastructural part. It's, the LCM is the same. So the question is, how do I migrate basically a test artifact to a production or a production back to test? LCM, it's the same as on-premise LCM, mostly. No, that's not true. I mean, it could be if you provision that way. The identity domain, well, we can look at it over here if you want. The identity domain administrator has the authorization to do one thing, manage users. That's it. They can't even, now, but there's another piece to this. Talk to me offline, and I will tell you about the other piece to this. All right, I think we're done. So I appreciate you coming, and thanks for the exchange. I had a lot of fun. I hope you had some fun and learned something.